welcome. Today, we are going to follow up an exploration that we did a couple of weeks ago with this general Portland visitors map, a map of Portland, Oregon, or really a map of the downtown area of Portland. And the makers of that map have created a different map called the Neighborhood Edition, which goes into a bit more detail on a number of areas not highlighted in the other map, primarily because they aren't in downtown or the Pearl District. So these are largely in the east side of town on the east bank of the Willamette River, although there will be one that is in northwest as well. So let's take a look. So we see here that the structure of this map is quite different from the other one, whereas the other map that we looked at was all one area of Portland. Here we're looking at 6 corridors of streets and avenues in Portland. We have 3 that are north and south, so primarily focused on streets that go north and south, with side streets going east and west here. And on the other side, we have 3 corridors of streets that are primarily east to west focused, but that have focuses, offshoots going north and south. I'm not going to start on this side though. We're going to start on this one. And like I said, these first 2 probably the most well-connected of the 6 that we have. You can kind of see that by the fact that a lot of their names of these side streets are the same. So we have Skidmore, Mason, Shaver, Failing, Beach, Fremont, and Cook that are all aligned with each other. And they are like that in real life. There is a bit of a discontinuity here. So there are about 3 to 4 blocks of space that's missing between these 2, but these are aligned roughly aligned with each other in real life. And so the main focal areas for these 2 pieces of the map are Mississippi Avenue here with the orange in its center, and Williams Avenue here in this light blue area, with the secondary companion of Williams being Vancouver Avenue. And one thing to note, of many, the first thing to note here is that here, when we're talking about the land that is west of Williams Avenue, that's this area over here, we're talking about North Portland. It's the 5th quadrant that I mentioned in the last video. That is the only quadrant of Portland to only have one direction in its prefix. So all the streets in Portland come with a directional prefix based off of their relation to the main dividing lines of the city. So any land, any streets that are north of Burnside Street have north. Any that are south of it are labeled south. Those that are west of the Willamette River have west as the second letter. Streets to the east have east as the second letter. And streets that are east of the river, but west of Williams Avenue, have the east removed, and they are just north. Another thing to note that we'll see on all of these maps, all of these corridors, is a lot greater focus on the smaller pieces of public transportation here. In the previous map, we saw a lot of rail transit, so light rail as well as the streetcar. Here, we're only going to see one of the streetcar lines, and the rest of these colored lines are going to be bus lines. So these are city buses that are run by TriMet, which is the organization that runs Portland's public transit, buses, and light rail. So here in orange, we have line 4. In blue, we have the 44. In this ochre yellow, we have the 24. Jumping ahead a little bit. In blue, we have the 77. In teal, we have the 15. And in this mid-green color, which is not probably going to be a little harder to see, but this is a green. This is the north-south line of the streetcar. And one thing that these bus lines show us is that quite a bit of Portland, although much more likely in commercial areas and in the downtown areas, are a series of one-way streets. So taking Williams and Vancouver, for example, along this corridor, Williams Avenue carries northbound traffic, and Vancouver Avenue carries southbound traffic. And so for bus systems to operate on this corridor, they need to have buses going on both sides, on both streets. And obviously, there's not much of a walk between these two streets, maybe a minute or two. So it's not super inconvenient for people to be able to use both streets as their ways to get to the 44. Getting into these a little bit more specifically, Mississippi and Williams and Vancouver are streets that are somewhat well known for their eclectic styles. That's generally true for all of the corridors that we're seeing. These tend to be the places most associated with the up-and-coming areas, the more I'm trying to think of the right word, but they tend to be where new ideas, new fashions, more eclectic tastes, more laissez-faire attitudes tend to be developed. And they also tend to be pretty popular. For example, we have Paxton Gate, which I believe we might see. It's not shown here, but there's another location of Paxton Gate on Northwest 23rd. But this is a store that is primarily known for outlandish, sometimes macabre gifts. A lot of taxidermied animals, preserved insects and butterflies, some interesting book anatomy or weird style books like Atlas Obscura, but it also has more conventional goods like plants, succulents, rocks, minerals. So whenever I go to Portland, I always try to fit a visit there. There's also Made PDX, which is more focused on local goods in general. In fact, you'll notice that quite a bit of these places, the ones with the bags, I'm not sure how well that will show up on the camera, but places like these will often feature locally made gifts, locally made art. We also have quite a bit of microbrewery or bar spaces. Portland is rather well known for its brewing and especially its microbrewing scene. We have Ecliptic, we have Stormbreaker, and of course we have our donuts. This is Blue Star Donuts, which is a more adult themed, a little bit more mature, but still unique donut shop. Considered a more proper, little less, it's a little less intentionally outlandish cousin to Voodoo Donuts, which is a more well-known, but not as higher brow donut shop in Portland. We see much the same in Williams and Vancouver, a little less so. I think Mississippi has Williams beat in terms of overall outlandishness, but they still have coffee. Portland is also a very big proponent of the their local coffee scene. We have Lompoc, also another brewery. And we have food carts, which is another thing that Portland is well known for, having small independent businesses, independent restaurants that serve their food from pods of food carts. Sometimes it's one of the easiest ways that you can find really unique food experiences or foods that you wouldn't expect to see in this part of the US. Moving on to Northwest Portland, to Northwest 21st and 23rd Avenues. We see much the same type of spirit. We have, again, two companion streets. We have 23rd, which is much more of the business district. We also have 21st, which is more residential, but still has a good number of businesses on it. We, of course, see a lot more of the same types of businesses. We have another Blue Star. We have Bud and Finn, which is another local boutique for goods that are specific, made in the Northwest, and that are a lot more specific to being in the Northwest. Although there are also a lot of national parks, general outdoorsy themes here. we can also see here a pair of themes that you can see in some areas of Portland. Not all areas, but quite a bit. Obviously, with the name of the section, 21st and 23rd, and with the streets that we can see in between. Quite a bit of central Portland tries to have a numbered theme in the streets, radiating east and west of the Willamette River. So here we're a little bit away from the river because we are starting with 18th, Northwest 18th Avenue, then 19th, then 20th, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. And we obviously continue far to the west, and we also mirror that on the east side, which we'll see when we get to the east side. And the other theme that I'd like to highlight is the alphabetical theme that follows north and south on these streets. This part of mostly Northwest Portland can sometimes be called the Alphabet District because the streets follow a mostly alphabetical pattern. So here on the southwest side, which we can't see, so down below where this map shows, we would have Ankeny for A, Burnside for B. This map doesn't show it, but we would have Cooch, spelled like couch, for C, Davis for D, then Everett, Flanders, Gleason, Hoyt, Irving, Johnson, Kearney, Lovejoy, Marshall, Northrop for N, Overton, Pettygrove, Quimby, Raleigh, Xavier. It's not shown here, but Thurman. We would then have Upshur, Vaughan, and then from there, the alphabet stops. So we don't actually get a full alphabet. Although most of these names come from people from Oregon and Portland history, and I don't believe there's anyone with an X or a Z name, so it wouldn't have been possible anyway. One last thing before we go to the other side of the map. We have some little inserts on this map. So here for Williams Avenue, we can see information about the Williams streetcar. Ever an important transit line, the Williams streetcar line was for many years a very important connection from North Portland to downtown. And here we see Northwest described as Slab Town. The Nob Hill area is also referred to as Slab Town. In the 19th century, a large mill opened up in this neighborhood. Residents often fueled their homes with leftover slabs of wood from the mill. That also reminds me, we have these descriptions of the neighborhoods. So for 21st and 23rd, excuse me, also often referred to as Northwest. Nob Hill is an excellent example of mixed-use planning with commercial main streets filled with charming homes and flanked on the north by a shrinking industrial area. Williams in Vancouver is a historically working-class neighborhood, now home to fine dining and eclectic shopping. And finally, the Mississippi area is a down-to-earth, funky neighborhood filled with great music, art, shopping, and of course, food. And with that, we turn ourselves over to the east side of the river, which we were already at for North Portland. But now we return. First, we have in northeast Portland, the Killingsworth and Alberta Street corridors. An alternative to even the most alternative neighborhoods, Killingsworth in Alberta boasts some of the most avant-garde arts and community elements in Portland. And that is certainly true nowadays. These streets tend to have a lot of businesses catering to the eclectic and eccentric styles of Portland. We can see we have food carts again. We have the Alberta Co-op, a cooperative, community-owned grocery store. And we have a lot of, again, smaller businesses. Along this section, even though it's not shown here, is Salt and Straw, which I can't believe I didn't mention back in the 23rd and 21st section. But Salt and Straw is a well-known and beloved ice cream store, which also has a lot of variety and a lot of uncommon combinations of flavors. It's beloved, and now it's outside of Portland. I believe it's mostly on the West Coast in Seattle and Los Angeles, and potentially San Francisco. I'm not sure, but it's becoming ever popular, and it's another place that I always try to visit whenever I'm in the city. We also have, again, a bit of a dichotomy where Alberta is generally more well known as a business street, although it does have some residential places. And Killingsworth is a bit more well known, at least in this section, as a residential street with some businesses throughout, such as Podna's, which is a wonderful barbecue place. And this inset shows off the Piedmont Barn. As recently as 1948, the Alberta streetcar with nearby Piedmont Barn connected downtown to the Alberta area, as the streetcar did many neighborhoods in a network rivaling that of San Francisco. And similarly, we have Hawthorne and Belmont, much farther south, again, south of Burnside. Although in this case, we are talking about East Burnside. There's much less of a dichotomy here between Belmont and Hawthorne. They're both generally well known as business-heavy streets. The map describes Hawthorne and Belmont as the counterculture capital of Portland, Hawthorne Boulevard being often compared to the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood of San Francisco. And of course, we see a lot of that in having comics, coffee, terrariums at plant stores, punny brunch places, which is also a music venue. Fried Egg, I'm in love. Our inset here shows the Laurelhurst streetcar. Much of this area was remote farmland until the exclusive Laurelhurst neighborhood went in north of here around 1914, plotted after consultation with John Charles Olmsted, the famous landscape architect. And I believe John Charles Olmsted was a relative of Frederick Law Olmsted, who might be more familiar as one of the architects of the Columbian Exposition, the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, as well as the major landscape architect organizer for Central Park in New York City. And lastly, we have Division and Clinton. Division is a vibrant, modern neighborhood on the east side with many hip places to sip, chomp, and chill. Of course, we see a lot of the places that we have talked about before. We have food carts, we have beer, breweries, Blue Star again, and we have the repair shop, which is south of Division near Ladd's Addition, the Center Street shop for working on streetcars and their rails, back when the streetcars were a lot more spread out among the city. It's nowadays the hub for TriMet, the company that owns the bus system and the rails systems. And we also have mentioned here Ladd's Addition, which, if we see here in this darker purple section, is quite odd in the overall grid structure of Portland streets. You can tell generally that a lot of this runs along a grid structure. Streets, avenues. There are quite a bit of places, particularly in hillier areas, where that isn't the case, where the road curves naturally. But Ladd's Addition is one of the few places where the grid system is deliberately broken in a intentional way as part of neighborhood planning and not because of the geography of the area. The streets are largely diagonal when compared to the overall Portland grid. And we only see a little section here, but this is roughly, continuing the scale of this map, roughly this square grid. And it's quite a beautiful place to walk around or bike around. Very residential compared to the rest of the neighborhoods that we've seen. In particular, the busy streets that we've seen along here. And I believe that's everything I have to share now. If I think of anything that I'd like to go into further on this map, then I'll have to make a sequel. And I'll probably think of adding details from the original map as well. But for now, I think I've shown you a good amount of what individual Portland neighborhoods have to offer outside of the center of town. And I hope that I've given you a better feel for how the city interacts with itself overall. And one last note, you'll probably see another number of jumps that happen from the recording of this video. We've had a bit of noise in the neighborhood tonight, so please excuse the jumps in continuity. I hope that in cleaning up the noise, we make for a better watching and listening experience. So thank you everyone for watching. And have a wonderful rest of your evening.